We've spent a lot of time over the last month or so tracing this downward progression of the economy that's unfolded almost well within a couple of weeks, maybe a month or so of when the president took office. And by and large, we've been pretty spot on. We see gold comfortably above $3,000 an ounce today. We see the markets in, pretty ragged shape. Nobody wants to declare the end to a 40-year bull market, trust and believe, okay? So you stand on the sidelines and just, you try to analyze things. But what we've not done is turn our attention back to China in quite a while. Let's get into it today. Good morning to all of you. I hope your post St. Patrick's Day is a good one. Really cold weather here, but I think we're coming hopefully to the end of wrapping up our rainy season. They tease that maybe my Monday will have 80 degrees up here. I don't know. We'll wait and see. As I mentioned, we focused a lot on what's going on with the U.S. economy recently and some of the moves to put tariffs in. We've had counter moves from nations like Canada. And of course, the psychology has wrapped into it, U.S. products being removed from the shelves. And it's a big problem of tariffs that we touched on before. Once they begin, they sort of take a life on their own. Once you open that Pandora's box of tariffs, who knows where it ultimately ends. But one thing we can predict with a pretty high degree of assurance is that it starts to act as a tremendous brake on international trade, both buying and selling overseas. But as I mentioned, we've not really talked about China at all. And China made a pivot recently that's really been unnoticed in much of the West. I hearken back many years ago when I first started to work in China. My first job was with AT&T and in their network cabling systems, which provides the backbone for buildings of high-speed fiber optics and things like that. Relatively new, well-engineered product. It was very, very well met. The Citibank Tower in Hong Kong uses it, and quite a lot of other facilities adopted that technology. My job was to take that technology and sell it in the Philippines, sell it in Taiwan, and particularly establish a way to sell that within mainland China. And I recall on one of my trips to Taiwan, we did business with a company called New Southern Engineering over there, and they're still in business today, located in Taipei. And I remember sitting there, and the chairman was discussing of New Southern Engineering. He was talking about what a good thing it is to have a large population base, because after a while, as an economy progresses, it can sort of create its own weather, right? Meaning that if you have a big enough population, you can support your economy by things that you do internally. Unless, of course, you're in a situation where you're cutting spending frantically and unleashing deflationary forces as we're doing here in the U.S. But I thought of that when I came back in my thinking to China, and I thought, with 1.2 billion people over there, this nation hasn't even begun to leverage its economic forces. What do I mean by that? Well, for many years after the communists took power in October of 1949, China was on just a cash and carry basis. You ain't get the cash, you ain't got the cash, you ain't getting whatever it is I'm selling. What credit there was extended in through agencies of banks that were beholden to the political party and really arms of development of the Chinese Communist Party. So people built up a couple things. Number one, they developed this tremendous economy of thrift. In other words, they didn't waste anything. Right. I remember when I was living over there and somebody scolded and corrected me when I had a bowl of rice because I left a couple grains of rice in the bottom of the bowl. It's like, oh man, are you right? You didn't live through the Great Famine of Chairman Mao in 1959 through 1961. You're out of your mind. Don't waste anything. This was a big part of the Chinese psyche, and also squirreling money and things away. Very difficult to do, right, when everybody in the supposed communist workers' paradise that they're all paid the same and their support is provided by the government. It's very difficult to have something known as free cash. Very difficult. So it took a long time until Deng Xiaoping came in and basically drove a stake into the heart of communism and said, look, whatever advances the people, right? Right. A black cat catches as many mice as a white one. So if you want to go hog wild and have a market economy, do it. Okay? But we'll still keep the umbrella of communism over top of it because we're not going to lose our governmental structure and our authoritarian ability to control the population, what they see, what they read, things like that. But it's very telling that after a lot of years now and being on this basically cash economy, credit cards are still a relatively rare thing over in China, right? Which means that lending and loans haven't been used to really lever up people's standard of living. In other words, if I want to buy a TV set, right, I have to put down the 3,200 yuan, right, to buy it. Right, credit is not easy to obtain. There's really no. It's nascent. It's in its infancy. The creating of credit reporting bureaus and things like that. So people are very hesitant to supply credit. Most of the credit goes into like housing and things, right? Well, you want to take a mortgage out on your tofu housing unit, right? Made of tofu. Well, go ahead. We'll write you the mortgage loan. On that, we have a lot of empty buildings in major cities as a result. But think about that, right? If you want to buy a car or something like that, they're still relatively rare. There's 1.2 billion people, and probably about 300 million have been raised up to a decency in a standard of living, with about 900 million still really far behind out in the countryside, western provinces and places like that, where people are still scratching at a living. I mention all this because China has a large enough population base to create its own economic weather. Recently, over the last couple weeks, the President Xi Jinping stood up at the Party Congress and said, you know what? Right, we have built this dependency on exports. Right, we're so geared to selling stuff overseas that we've really not done that much to develop our own home market in terms of people's consumption. And maybe it's about time that we weaned off of exports and started to really use our efforts to raise up people within the nation of China. This is a huge, huge sea change. This is enormous, right? And the problem is, things really don't happen naturally too much in China because it does have this government overlay. Where all lending, all political support, everything is to get that factory built with a joint venture with a foreign company, ship that stuff back to the other country, sell it, and bring the money home. Now the effort is pointed towards, let's see what we can do to raise our own standards of living. And we have an unlimited base of demand here of people that will want the products that we're selling. Why don't we make an effort to begin selling this stuff to them, our appliances, right? our electric cars, our clothing that we still produce, right? All of the electronics. This is a huge change. And it could be one of the reasons that we're starting to see some separation in the markets now, in the equity markets, the stock markets, between what's going on in China recently. And Hong Kong was kind of a proxy for China, and say the United States. All right. China is beginning to separate in performance from us. Right. And the other strange thing, too, is that Europe is starting to separate from us in some extent and outperforming. How long it lasts, I don't know. Right. China basically took the hits of the tariffs, didn't really squeal too much about it. But you can trust and believe all of the effort now is directed towards increasing consumption within China. And this could be an economic force similar to what happened in this nation in the 1940s, 50s, 60s. A tremendous boost in standards of living and economic activity. It remains to be seen, of course. Contrast this with the United States. We don't really have the ability to leverage our economy anymore. Right? We're choking on credit. We're choking on credit card debt. We're choking on state debt, city debt, federal government debt. We're choking on that. The ability to lever up is past now. Now we deal with the consequences of things like default. And all of this potentially works over time, not tomorrow, not next year, maybe not 5 years. All of this works to drive us back down to a cash-based society, where once again credit becomes difficult to obtain, either because of job losses, the cost of credit, etc. It really is something to think about. It's the circle closing upon itself once again, while the dynamics of China are in a totally different place. There's a lot to think about in this upload today, and it's a good time to say, if you're not subscribed to the channel and you want to kind of think to a deeper level than just a blurb of news on CNBC or Fox or MSNBC, CNN, Bloomberg, here's a chance to really have some good, deep thought about the state of the world, particularly in the sphere of economics, which is really the driver of politics, as we know. So I'd appreciate if you would take a second, just take your finger, subscribe, and hit that bell for all notifications. And let me know in the comments section down below what you think. I'm very gratified that these uploads are so well received. And another thing you can trust and believe, people's interest in this type of topic is going to grow dramatically in the coming months and years. All right, thanks for watching, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your